Hello, everybody. We are back. We are here. We are live. And if this is your first time being here, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. I am Maccabee Griffin, and this is Miss C.R. Rice. Say hello.
Hello, we are back again.
They can't keep us down.
I don't think they would try. We're too delightful.
That's true.
Everybody has too much fun when they listen. They would be like, no, we can't do that.
We bring the humor to the publishing world in some way, shape, or form.
We make it great because of our tangents, our ever growing titles, our different views on things, and how it still works out, right? We're able to do the whole well rounded thing. We're not like everybody else where we're like, you're totally right. We're conflicting, and it works because you get two different opinions on things. And when we have our guests, we sometimes get three different opinions.
Speaking of which, I don't have a title. You haven't given me a title yet.
We have it.
No.
Host extraordinaire, voice acting supreme leader. Nope, we're gonna have to switch that up. We'll work on it. We'll work on
Oh, yeah. I almost felt like, oh my gosh, what I cannot remember the gentleman's name for the life of me, but he's apartments.com.
Oh yeah, the guy that goes through the different things to show you.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just like, right when she was going through, I was like, superior. Don't you think it's a little too much?
It's Jeff Goldblum now?
Yeah, it's always been Jeff Goldblum.
How's it? Oh, I'm thinking of the Truvago one. You remember where
Oh,
everybody got to go onto the website and literally vote how this man was gonna look for their stuff? Do you remember that?
mm-hmm.
Oh, that's when society began to crash.
Well, that's still up for debate on the time frame. Speaking of time frames, we're going to be talking about something that most people don't really think about from a reader's point of view, and that is
Young adult novels. When should we stop writing them? And
yes.
as a young adult author, I think it comes down to what type of YA you're writing. I do the Realm series. It's some teenagers, 17, 18 and older. I'm not doing the high school setting, except for In Denial. There's a little bit of it. So I don't have that normal, typical teenage interactions, right? So, and because it's fantasy, you get to flourish a few things. But what if you're a young adult author that is writing the daily life of a high school student?
Hmm.
And you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s. Like, are you still relatable at that point, do you think? Or do you think it needs to be, I don't know, switch it, go to college? Like, and do that new age college theme? What do you think, Mac?
For me, I think
Pulling out all the voices. Title's already going to your head.
well, if we're going to be talking about stuff like this, it's just something that we have to figure out. But seriously, folks, seriously. Honestly, I think depending on the character and what their situation is.
Okay.
I know that a lot of young adult books stick around that time frame
Mm-hmm.
because of all the archetypes that we're dealing with the certain situations and the conflicts. There's so many weird things that go into it when it comes to those key elements of writing. And speaking of key elements of writing, I want to
Uh,
get your thoughts on this. What
okay.
are your 5 key elements of writing?
Okay, so which way do we want to take this? Do we want to take what are things that I incorporate to my writing?
What are the things that are most important, like plot, setting?
We've talked about I'm a chaos writer. I have no plan for any of my books. Like I've never even read any of my books. Like, and I know, but it's one of those weird things, okay? So go with me on this. Obviously, I have read through my parts as I puzzle them together, right?
Right.
And I go and I do the chapter before, the chapter after, current, everything like that to make sure it flows. It is uncomfortable for me to write or to read my book once it's published.
Hmm.
It seems, first of all, I still edit it to this day. Like, I still go through, and every time I try to read something that I've written, I dissect it a million different ways. If I read other books, sometimes I do the same thing, but not as much. But it makes me physically uncomfortable to read my own writing. It's like it's how I imagine, like, when actors go and you act in something, right? Or you're a voice actor, right? So you go through and you do that, and then to hear yourself or to watch yourself act as something, I feel like it would be very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's another thing that, like, I don't know if it's the same with authors, but for actors, one of the major things that we're not supposed to do, or at least you're told, one of the unspoken rules is don't read reviews. Reviews will kill your confidence in everything
Yes.
that you do.
Mhm. And you get them for the craziest things, right?
Mhm.
So I had now before Amazon, if anybody listening is an author and you have your book on Amazon, you probably understand what's going on right now. Amazon is going through and taking away reviews from authors,
Yeah.
specifically the ones that are not published through KDB Publishing. Somehow your reviews are flagged and get taken off. So for your book to be recommended to other people, you need at least 25 reviews on your book. I have had my books removed from, accidentally, of course, from
Okay.
Amazon 4 times. Do you know what happens when that happens? You lose every single review you've had and you start from scratch all over again, which is both a blessing and a curse. Because I had one review, which is why I started doing my novellas, is because somebody had said they didn't like Silas. And I very much like Silas. I liked him very much, and that is why I wrote him. They did not agree with him. So, to change their minds, I wrote Silas's story to get people to like the characters that I like. My husband said it was very manipulative, and yes, it was. However, nobody fully appreciated Silas, and that needed to happen. So, in that way, it was a great review. It was awesome. But the one line that stuck out to me was Silas is a terrible, terrible character. I don't understand how he plays into this book. Yes, yes. He's literally the person that goes across realms to bring back the lost heir to the throne, but didn't understand why it had to be him. So that is what happens when I get reviews. I'm like, oh, this is a great review, but that one line people say, that'll be it. It could be 5 star, it could be 20-star review, but they'll say that one thing, which I'm sure you get too. Like,
Mhm.
wonderful review. And then it's like, but it could have been longer. And it keeps me up at night. And I'm just like, oh my God, it so could have been. I should have made it longer. Meanwhile, these books are like 100,000 words. And I'm still just like, they're right. Should have been longer. Damn it. I should have written it longer. And it haunts you. It's terrible.
Yes, it is terrible. Silas was a terrible person, but
Woo!
he was not, I don't mean it in that way. The character himself, I liked Silas. Okay. Silas was a good character.
Uh-huh.
His things that he did were not the best.
He made a few choices.
A few.
There were a few. There were a few choices that were questionable, but we always have those redemption arcs, right? That's why authors, that's it's an entire thing. That's why you
Yeah.
have your redemption arc. And now Silas has his own realm. So whoever didn't like him, guess what, guys? He's everywhere. Because that's what I do when I get a negative review.
Well, speaking of negativity,
Yes.
let's talk about a lot of the things that go into young adult books and dealing with those negativities that
Mhm.
we all go through, the ways that people look at us and they could be way off, and then all of a sudden we start to think about that ourselves.
Mhm.
This is the one thing I do like about young adult books is because they are so real in the sense that these are things that every person has gone through, everybody's dealt with. We've all
Mhm.
had that whole idea of a coming of age story in our lives.
Yes.
Some of them are the same in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
Others, not so much.
Yes.
But we're hitting in a time where young adult books are changing
Mhm.
to present a certain viewpoint. And unfortunately, sometimes they're very on point and they're true. Well, I'm not saying they're not true. The other ones aren't true, but there are certain things that are said that could be left out. Like,
Yes.
for instance, there are certain things that teenagers go through that you shouldn't have to talk about. Because when I think of, we'll go with bullying. Okay.
Mhm.
Bullying has been around for generations. We
Since the
all,
beginning of time.
Cain and Abel, first bullies, obviously. When we look at all these other things that go with it, bullying back in the days when I was growing up, back in my day, it was really just considered another way of just toughening up, building up that skin. That's how I'm sold. No, but it is. It's true.
I mean, even when I was in school, it's one of those things where this is going to sound terrible. Are you ready for this? We're about to get in trouble. I think certain bullying is necessary. Now, let me explain why. First of all, you're going to get it no matter where you go. As an adult, you get bullied, whether it's by coworkers, strangers, your bosses, your family member, whoever. Bullying is a part of our lives. But it also helps make you the person that you are. I'm not saying you should go out and be terrible to people. I'm not. But as soon as they started making it so that people cannot express themselves, isn't that what they used to call it? It's different ways of self-expression, like, oh, the little boy on the playground pulled her pigtails. He likes it. It's different ways of learning communication, right? When you take out a kid's ability and you shield them from the actual world, you are inhibiting their growth. That's why there are so many people that have depression and anxiety. It's because you didn't get that. This is terrible, but you didn't get your ass handed to you in school. You didn't get picked on. You didn't get any of those things. And I'm not saying we should let some of the craziness that goes on go on, but you have to expose people to the terrible parts of the world because, as much as we don't want to admit it, the world sucks. There are certain times where situations sucks. Life is hard. And we're taking that exposure away from kids and it's turning them into terrible people. And they get entitled and they're rude and they aren't able to take even the smallest jabs. And it's making us kind of wussy.
That is true. That is very true. And here's the other difference that I've seen again in my old age, of 43 years old. I'm so old. I know. I'm so ancient. Is the fact that we got it from both points. We got it from peers, we got it from our siblings. That's why sibling rivalry is such a thing, and it always will be. I don't care who you are, there's at least some point of sibling rivalry.
Some of it is healthy.
Yeah, some of it is healthy. I will definitely admit that. Other points are like, dude, you're just being a stop. But we also had it from our parents as well. Now,
Mhm.
here's the difference. Many people nowadays see that as just being abused. The problem is when you take a stance on that and you try to change the definition of abuse, mental, physical, and what trauma is, mental, physical, then you start to change the whole overall feel of how discipline is considered, either being taught, hey, you don't do this, okay, bam, you're gonna get a whooping, okay, or is it, oh my gosh, I got beat so badly from my parents. They used the belt, they used the paddle, they used their
Oh.
hands, they used the switch, they used all the things that are around me. And I just got, no, no, no.
Mhm.
That was the point of, hey,
Exactly.
you get hurt, you're not going to do it again. There's one joke a long time ago, was that when a child is playing with those TVs back in the day, and for those who are not my age, we had TVs that were not, 10 pounds. We had these big old honking things that took up a whole freaking wall some days that
You
weighed a
couldn't move it.
hundred. No, you couldn't. You could not move that thing. It weighed like 100, 200 pounds. It sucked.
Mhm.
But our families would put them on TV stands that were made to last forever, not something from, we won't put that.
IKEA.
I was trying not to use that one, but yes.
I love IKEA.
Well, yeah, it's cheap.
Well, it's
Absolutely.
because I know everybody hates the fact that everything comes in 1,000 pieces, right? Puzzles
Yes.
are one of my favorite pastimes. I love putting stuff together. It is my favorite thing in the entire world. Anytime we go and get stuff, Corey's always like, "Oh my God, that's going to be so many pieces." I'm like, "It's okay. I got this." And like I go through and it's so much fun. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's why I'm kind of sad that like we bought a house because I'm just like we're never going to move again, which means I'm never going to be able to put stuff together. Everything that we have is so solid now because that's one of the things you do when you buy a house, right? You go and you get the stuff that's going to last forever.
Hmm.
Very sad. Going with what you said, YA books have come up like that, right?
Yeah.
So beforehand, it was all about the dealing with the. And now I will say those old school books that you read about how school was.
Hmm.
I would love to go to school in the 80s. Just from like I mean, okay, maybe I wouldn't have, I don't know, but just from reading like the YA books that take place there and they talk about all this stuff, or even seeing the young adult shows like that you watch. And it's like they take place in the 80s or they have that 80s theme. And like you guys had like school dances all the time. You did all of these fairs, all of this amazing stuff, and you read about it. And I'm just like, my school life wasn't like that. Like, maybe that's completely unrealistic and that's not how it actually was then?
Um, there is some truth to it. Yes, we did have a lot of dances. We didn't have as many fairs per se. We had Now, are you talking like school fairs? Or are you talking out
Yeah,
fair
no,
fairs?
yes, like both. They have like all the it's the whole, when they do over in Japan and stuff like that, they do the school festival, right? Every
Yes.
year they do a school festival. It's this giant thing. And I'm always like, dang, I want to go to school in Japan. They have so much fun. They work so hard, but they do all of those things. And I'm like, I remember being a kid and reading about all of these old school, novels and stuff like that. And I was just like, is this what it's going to be like when I get to high school? It was not.
Let me give you a little bit of perspective because it does go into play with what our next guest is going to be talking about and
Mhm.
the viewpoints of today's world comparative to back then. High school life is one of the biggest tropes that are used in young adult life because again, it's something that teenagers go through, i.e., was it 17th Summer or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, 17th Summer by Maureen Daly. This was the first YA novel ever written, and it was published in 1942 by a teenager for teenagers about teenagers. And then, of course, Outsiders came out in the 70s, and that's when people were like, okay, this is a thing now. We've got a
Yes.
new audience. In the 80s, we still had a lot of things going on. Not so much as gender equality because that was late 60s, early 70s that hit with women coming into power. I don't even say power. Women
Getting
getting equal
equal
rights. Yeah.
rights.
Yeah. Women coming into power and taking over the world and
Women take
changing everything.
over. Yes.
Dang it, that woman style thinking. My God, what's going on in this world? Why not just make a horrifical thing? Yeah, let's just cut it off right here, cancel the show.
We're racking them up. We're doing awesome this time. We're trying so hard for the hate mail. We are trying to do that cancel thing. Not
Yeah,
intentionally, of course, but just it just slips out.
it does. It does. Those viewpoints, that opinion about
I
real
know.
life. Yeah, no, but as someone who grew up in the 80s, teenager by the 90s. That's where a lot of societal views on teenage life was changing.
Mhm.
There were even in TV. I was watching earlier today. I was just going through YouTube, and then all of a sudden I saw the thing about Blossom Reunion that happened a couple of years back.
The 80s TV show?
Technically, it was 1990, but yeah,
Wow, I didn't know they did that. Okay, continue.
one of the things that the cast brought up was that it was a different viewpoint on the nuclear family, and the fact that it was also from a young teenage girl's viewpoint of life and not from a male point of view. Because during that time, prior to that, a majority of these shows were based around a mom, dad, brother, sister. That was the family.
That is true.
And most of the time, it was from the brother's point of view, the son's point of view of life. Because again, you had a lot of men writing about this stuff. But in this case, it was a single father dealing with two teenage boys and a teenage girl with her friend. And all the little things coming for her was like, but it was also from her point of view.
Okay, so do you think this is one thing that bothers me sometimes.
Mhm.
As a man, when you read something that is told from a male perspective but is written by a woman, how many errors do you find in thinking?
There's a lot of them. I can't give you a specific number, but there are points of view that don't mix. You're right. And that's why when we're talking about character development, character, uh, just the whole thought process about the plot, the story, and everything else, these are key points that need to be understood when you're writing your book. If you're talking about writing a book about a young woman going through something, make sure you were a young woman at that time. Don't
Or
be,
speak to people.
or
Like,
what?
I've read so many of the books where you go through and a man has written something from a woman's perspective, which is why I was wondering if it's the same with men. I assumed it was because I don't know what guys do. Like, I mean, I know, but like, I don't know the thought process. But you'll read something, and I'm like, oh yeah, a guy definitely wrote this.
Yeah.
Because especially when you go through some of the, Danny had sent me a book, and it was one of those romantic. She's like, you have got to read this, just this passage. It was for, we were choosing something for the pop up bookshop, and we're going through, and we went, and I won't say the author's name or anything, but it was so unrealistic.
Hmm.
I'm like, this is clearly something that like guys want. Because I don't know a single girl that is going to run down the street after seeing somebody because he briefly looked at her. No, honey, that is not what women are going to do. You are not freaking Henry Cavill. You no. And even then you wouldn't. That's assault. Like you don't do that.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just so unrealistic and it's I think that's one of the reasons why I think I expected so much reading those YA novels and going into high school that I was just like, no, this sucks. Like this is terrible. This is nothing like what I read. This is not what I was promised. This is I there's no epic great adventure. There's nothing.
Yeah, no, there's none of that. And it's true. Like, again, during the 80s it was a little bit different. We weren't dealing with sexuality at that time. We were dealing with race at that time. So, even well, let me state that again. Majority of things in society was based around race and not sexuality. The only major things through sexuality during the 80s was all around AIDS and how it was destroying the homosexual community, i.e., the men. And then when it started to blend into donating blood and having transfusions and that whole spiel, then it started like, oh, this is not just a gay community issue. This is a human issue because
Mhm.
now we have people that are playing this and that and all this. And then of course you had the church condemning all this stuff and it's like, oh, this is this and that. It's like, oh God, please stop.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that, books are supposed to be an escape, right?
Yes.
So, or at least that's what I do. That when I read it because I want to escape from whatever I'm going on, whether it's a deadline that I refuse to acknowledge, or it's sometimes you just don't feel like doing anything, so you want to go into a different world. I think sometimes people push their agendas into books without realizing, or I hope they don't realize it sometimes. But and it almost takes away the majesty of reading.
Yeah.
I don't want to read a book about people getting brutally bullied and then oh my god, what is that freaking genre? Here we go again with genres. The bully to lover genre? Guys, what the heck is going on? Oh, Mac, I'm going to send you some books. It's a whole genre built around how a guy starts bullying a girl viciously. Not even like, oh, I'm gonna push you to the side or I'm not gonna talk to you. It is vicious rumor spreading, vandalism, like violence, all this crazy stuff. And somehow the girl falls in love with the boy. Be realistic, guys. That's not happening. I am more likely to kill you if you do those things to me than I am to fall in love with you.
Here's the thing with that, though, and I think that's interesting that you bring that up too, because when you're looking at bullying, when you're looking at teasing, because again, teasing was teasing. That was it.
Yes,
It was,
teasing is different.
unless you were talking about going in, kicking somebody's butt, or making their life a living hell,
Yes.
that's bullying. Okay,
Mhm.
that's a whole different ball game of no, we don't do that. Teasing, on the other hand, is everybody had a nickname. And sometimes they weren't good ones. I had one in the military, and I will refuse to put it out there what it
You know
is
what, Mac? What
because,
is it?
oh,
What was
Jesus.
it?
I will put it out. Okay. So in the military, you get the most ridiculous name. One of our sergeants
Mhm.
his last name was Ball. So his name was Balls Deep. Um,
Love it.
yeah. We had a gentleman who had, I can't remember what the skin disorder is, but when you have different colored skin, you looks like
Yeah.
you have patches. His nickname was Patches.
Okay.
I don't know why mine came out like this,
Oh,
but
really?
mine was Twink. And I think the main reason why was because of the fact that I was a theater guy. I loved the theater. I loved music like that. So in
Okay.
their mind,
I'm assuming they caught you eating a Twinkie or something. Like that's what I
no,
thought it was going to be something fun.
no, yeah, you would think that. No, they just wanted to call me that. Which, when you look up the definition of twink, it's not exactly the best one you can get. So, and I still to this day, every once in a while, they'll come out to me and say, "Hey, Twink, it's nice to see that you're doing so good," or something like that. I was like, "You bastards, I hate you."
I thought I escaped this. Yeah.
It's not a no, it's never an escape. But that's what happens. Like that was teasing. It wasn't
Teasing.
bullying. Yeah, it
Yes.
wasn't bullying. So when I was growing up, everybody had a different nickname. There is a older gentleman. I can't remember this comedian's name, but he was talking about when he was growing up that everybody just had a nickname. Like
Mhm.
one guy's name was Aim, and the reason being is because he lost an eye because of a BB gun or something like that. So it looked like he was aiming all the time.
I like
Uh,
it.
he had a guy that lost his finger, so they called him instead of having 10 fingers, so like nine fingers, something like that, or index. I think it was index, or it was one of the fingers, and that's what his name was.
Right.
It has a whole concept of a big guy being called tiny and a little guy being called big
Big.
something.
Yeah.
That's teasing, but it's also the way that the life was because it
Mhm.
built you up. It made you grow thick skin. So one of the things when I was going but talking about the TVs and everything is the joke was let them pull it down on the head. They'll learn not to do it again. Oh, he wants to put a penny in the light socket. Let him do it. He'll get shocked. He'll learn not to do it again.
He's won't do it again. Exactly. Yes. Yes. I remember that. My mom used to say that all the time. Oh, great. Childhood trauma. Um, so you go through, but I wonder if that's what the issues are with some YA books.
Right.
Is we're create now, granted, it's fiction, it's not real, guys. Please keep that in mind. And people devise their own metaphors every time you read something or get their own ideas. But things like romanticizing bullying, I'm wondering if we're going too far as authors in the YA community. I wonder if creating unrealistic situations in a high school setting is taking it too far. And
Hmm.
that's coming, like, I love YA. It's one of my favorite genres. I write in it. I I created a fantasy world so I didn't have to, literally did not want to. I hated high school so much. I went out of my way to blow the school up in my own world because the realm was, no, not like nobody was in it. That's not what I'm saying. It was, Mac, you're making this so bad.
I am.
But they went, the shadows came through. Like, I modeled the school after mine, and I made sure that they just, took out half of the building. And then I took my entire world away from it because I hated high school so much. Like, it is one of those things that I'm wondering if we're making mistakes as YA authors.
And that's true. And we have to understand that when we are dealing with young adults, like she said, there's a certain point where we need to stop.
Like, it's almost as if we've drifted so far away it's not relatable. And isn't that what it's supposed to be?
And that's a thing that when we're looking at young adult novels, the generational thing is that it's going to change because high school changes for everybody involved. So when you are dealing with things from the 80s, it's not going to transition very well into modern times. So if you are
Ooh.
talking about someone that is a teenage guy during the 80s, if you've lived through that, but you try to put that in modern times, it's not going to be the same unless you have a teenager who can explain it to you as you guys have this conversation. And like we say with historical fiction, do your research.